out on my way to Harlem. Ellington, you don't live around here. He moved away one day, so they say, from Harlem. I can hear his echo still. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by my daddy's horn. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by the jazz man's horn. Oh, I found out on my way through Harlem. Langston Hughes, he don't live round here. He moved away one day from his way here in Harlem. I know that Marvin Gaye used to play right here. Somebody say you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by my daddy's horn.
Okay, welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community. I'm Stu. I'm here by myself, but I have my buddy Dave Burstein on remote. Dave, are you there?
I am here, and I think you've got a good show planned.
Oh, well, thank you, Dave. Let's hope so. The first thing I wanted to talk about was we had a really fascinating, interesting event this past week in Harlem. We had our third annual Harlem Emergency Preparedness Day event. And the event was staged at the Harlem State Office Building Plaza outside. And this is the third year. Previously, we have been inside. Last year, we were inside Harlem Hospital. The year before that, we were inside the Harlem State Office Building itself. This year, we were outside on the plaza, and the whole idea was to bring the event to the community. And I have to say, we got an incredible reception. Must have been a couple hundred folks passed through the event. We had tables with vendors out giving hands-on demonstrations, CPR. Harlem Hospital had a number of technicians out demonstrating CPR on mannequins, and general regular people had a chance to come by and actually learn the techniques to actually put their hands on the mannequin and learn about CPR. And a bunch of other activities as well. OEM was there talking about evacuation plans and planning for your family emergency planning. The Fire Department of New York was there talking about fire safety. The Farmers Market was there as a backdrop. The 125th Street Harlem Farmers Market is on the plaza every Tuesday, and they have a fascinating array of fresh produce, vegetables, and fruit. And, of course, that ties in quite well to sustainability, which is what our event was all about. So it was really heartening to see folks in the community coming by and learning about things like flood zones in Harlem. We learned after Superstorm Sandy, I think was it 4 years ago? Or no, 3 years ago, that Harlem...
And there's still people whose homes have not been repaired.
Absolutely right.
Shows you how badly government can take care of things sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of our effort here is that, we want to have our community be self-reliant. After Superstorm Sandy 3 years ago, Angela Harden, who's the general manager of WHCR FM 90.3, came to a number of us and said she wanted to start a emergency broadcast team that could get information out to the community in emergencies. So with that, WEBT, WHER's emergency broadcast team was born. And we've been operating for about 3 years now in putting together procedures and protocols and systems to keep our community informed so that in an emergency, we're not waiting for the first responders per se, because oftentimes they're going to be distracted, they're going to be busy. So we have to learn to take care of ourselves and be prepared so that we can take care of each other. And that's what this Emergency Preparedness Day event was all about. And I was so proud to be a part of it. It was really an important occasion. The Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer, spoke. She came, and she's quite a special lady in herself, in that she's very involved in community affairs and community activities. But Dave, one of the things I wanted to talk about was how that event and what we do here at WEBT ties into community and technology. And
well,
go ahead.
One of the biggest issues constantly in telephony and the internet is making sure you're connected in an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
That can be anything from rushing satellite radio phones to the places hit by Ebola and to Nepal, which the ITU jumped in with, to making sure that the next time there's a Sandy, you can call out to emergency services from your home.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people who aren't going to be able to. If they use cell phone, the typical cell phone tower has 4 hours of backup battery.
Wow, that's awful. 4 hours, Dave?
Yep.
Wow, the FCC permits that. I mean, that's by regulation.
That should be illegal. The FCC has tried to put a regulation out to make it longer.
Mm-hmm.
And Verizon and AT&T have gone to court. This was years ago, and have kept it tied up ever since.
Wow, that's amazing.
That affects lives.
That's amazing. And now the landline phones, they're on battery power, but they're 72 hours backup on the landline central offices?
The typical landline central office would keep going through 6 days of Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
Some of them did.
No, I was just going to say, I remember in my home when Superstorm Sandy came. No, I'm sorry. I'm rewinding further to the last power outage we had. I think it was 2003. That went about 6 days, and we lost our landline service after 3 days.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And Verizon is not doing what they used to do there.
Mm-hmm.
The emergency preparedness for a hurricane, and I did a 45-minute interview with Bill Smith, who ran Katrina, is very extensive if you do it right, and very expensive if you do it right. He was at Bell South then, which is now part of AT&T, and they haven't had a hurricane like Katrina ever since, and few that are that demanding.
Mm-hmm.
But to do it right, they have to have everything in place in order to jump in every 10th-year hurricane, every 100-year flood, ideally.
Mm-hmm.
That means a fleet of trucks loaded up with generator fuel, ready to deliver when it's needed. That was actually one of the biggest problems in Katrina. They had the trucks, they had the fuel for the generators, but they couldn't get in past the police lines. That only emergency workers were allowed into many parts of New Orleans and thereabouts, and they didn't allow the trucks with the generator fuel. So Bill was actually on the FCC committee that tried to get delivery men from the phone company and their repair people declared emergency workers, so they could get in then. The second group of people who aren't going to be able to call out is anybody with Verizon Fios.
Why is that, Dave?
Verizon Fios, instead of being a copper line like your landline phone, is delivered over fiber, and the glass can't carry electricity. So all you have is whatever backup you put into the unit in your house.
So this is all the folks that have the so-called triple play from Verizon, the Fios triple play. In an emergency, that phone is going to be out. Is that what you're saying?
It doesn't have power by default, Verizon will sell you a battery, but the battery will die after about 4 years. And the experience is that most people don't put in a new battery when that battery dies.
Okay, let me ask you this, Dave. I've heard, and I think I know the answer, but let's hear it for our audience. They say that the old-fashioned phones that plugged into the wall, as opposed to the cordless phones, that the power was delivered over the telephone line. And I think what I hear you saying is that is no longer the case with fiber because it does not carry electricity. Is that right?
You're right on target. The basic phone plugged into the wall has enough power for you to make phone calls in an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the new stuff, from cordless phones to the Fios connector in the wall, does not have power and will die in an emergency unless you manage to put in some backup power, and very few people do. In many countries, when they make the switch, they're requiring the phone company or the cable company to have a backup battery in there,
mm-hmm.
and that will save lives. On the other hand, most of us have cell phones now.
Mm-hmm.
Most emergencies don't go longer than 4 hours, and there probably are more lives being saved by cell phones than could be lost by all these issues of power and emergency.
Mm-hmm. Dave, do you have any suggestions for our listeners out there on ways to recharge the cell phones when there is no power in the wall? Because that's, of course, one of the issues. The cell phone dies. Are there any portable power generator suppliers for cell phones that our listening audience needs to know about?
I'm calling in from home, and I'm looking on my desk, and I see two of them.
Mm-hmm.
For somewhere between $8 and $20, you can get a nice little unit that basically is a battery that you plug your cell phone in, or your tablet, or anything else you're using if you're out of juice. And the one I got for about $11 has a good hour's worth of juice in it. Now, I didn't get it for emergencies. It might have been a good idea. I got it because sometimes I forget to charge my tablet and I want to go on reading and I want to be able to plug it in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely the backup battery for your cell phone is a great convenience for the day that your cell phone runs out of power, even more in an emergency.
Right.
Well, let me tell you how important it is because it really hit home. Eleanor Burstein, my stepmother, was feeling very weak as she went to bed one night. She had enough sense to call my brother, who's a paramedic. He instantly called 911 when he heard how her speech was slurred.
Mm-hmm.
They came. They instantly saw what was what. They took her to the emergency room that started giving her blood. She was arthritic. She had been taking a lot of aspirin or an equivalent. She was having bleeding from her stomach.
Wow.
If 911 and Danny's phone hadn't worked that night, she almost definitely would not have woken up the next morning. On the other hand, got into the hospital, taken care of, and lived a good life for many years after.
God bless her.
That's why this communication is critical and why these are issues. But the phone companies don't make any money on their backup systems.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, for example, at New York Tel, they always had somebody on duty covering every switch. Often they sat a whole shift not doing anything. It could have been covered remotely, and now it is covered remotely, and those people are gone. The time when you need them, they're not there. AT&T and Verizon and all the other phone companies have fired tens of thousands of employees in recent years. If you're non-revenue generating, that's the term they use, you probably got fired. So most of the people on the emergency team that used to be the envy of the world, the American phone system, have been fired over the last few years because they don't bring in any revenue. Regulation is a bummer often.
Yeah, where's the government on this? Where is the FCC on this? Sounds like it's so critical. Where's Homeland Security on this? I mean, the very security of the people of the country are at risk without that kind of backup support.
It's called regulatory capture. That's the economist terms. It says they bought and own most of the regulators. And that's true on most issues most of the time. It's only on the occasional thing, when a regulator has some courage. Wheeler has shown some. The guy before, Janikowski at the FCC, was an empty suit with no balls. That things that have to happen do happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the reasons why I waste so much time dealing with the problems in Washington, because there's so few people there who aren't owned by the phone companies and the cable companies, that every voice helps fighting for what's necessary. What's next on the list?
Well, we were going to talk a little bit about the White House recently came out with a report where they said that broadband is, quote unquote, a core utility, unquote, like electricity, which I thought was a pretty amazing statement from the White House. So what's your take on that?
It's true, or it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And it is true in Finland, for example, where they say broadband is a human right. It's so important that you be connected to the internet in case you have an emergency, in case you want to go looking for a job, in case of anything and everything that we solve with the internet, that they're guaranteeing it to everybody.
Yeah, let me just read a piece from the report, Dave, if I can. It says, and I'm quoting, broadband internet has steadily shifted from an optional amenity to a core utility, and it is now taking its place alongside water, sewer, and electricity as essential infrastructure for communities, says the report released by the White House yesterday, and this was September 22nd. The report was written by the Broadband Opportunity Council, which was created by President Obama and is chaired by the heads of Commerce and Agricultural departments. So, I mean, this is a fairly astounding statement by our political leadership, acknowledgement of something that we've been talking about for years, that indeed what you just said, Dave, that it is a critical facility, broadband, for life-saving services, for education, for medical services, for job and employment. And there's so much, you can't get a job at McDonald's these days without broadband. You got to apply online, for Christ's sake. So, I mean, how does one, if you're lacking resources, how do you survive in this world today, certainly in America today, without broadband?
I have a totally different take on what the president's report is.
Okay.
What does a politician do when they have a problem they don't know how to solve?
Get a committee. Get a committee, yeah.
And they say some nice words. There's no money behind that, getting broadband to everybody. They may take a little bit off the phone system, but that looks like it's not going through anytime soon. There's no regulation that says Verizon or Time Warner must hook up everybody to a minimum connection. Or, and this is the really ugly one, offer the poor a connection at a reasonable price. Comcast offers a $10 for the poor. Of course, we'd rather it be free, but that's not so bad. The cheapest service you can get from Verizon, where they're using Fios, is somewhere between $63 and $75.
Wow.
There's a lot of people who can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If there was any courage at the FCC, all those big companies would be ordered to offer something decent for the poor. That would be one of the two great ways to get everybody this coverage, instead of putting out fancy reports in Washington with words that are meaningless. The heads of whose committees managed to waste several $billions they were given in the broadband stimulus to connect the unconnected. But that's another story.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I just ran across a related report that said the United States is ranked 20th in the world in terms of broadband speed, with South Korea coming in number one. Hong Kong, Japan, Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Norway, Latvia, Finland, and Czechoslovakia are all ahead of this country. That's kind of amazing. And we kind of think of ourselves as as one of the most, if not the most advanced industrial and technological countries, yet Latvia has faster broadband. I find that amazing.
As we said last week, our wireless doesn't make it. I have a story I'm writing in front of me right now that says, sorry, Barack, U.S. wireless is far from the best in the world. That's what he claimed about 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
The wireless you get from Verizon is said to be 6 to 12 megabits. It averages about 19. Telecom Albania just put in connections that are 150 to 250 megabits.
How much a day? Say that again?
150 to 250.
Wow.
In fact, there's 30 countries in the world, the Maldives among them, and some major countries too, that are 5 or 10 times as fast on the wireless connection as the United States. So, Barack Obama, I voted for you. I'd happily vote for you for a third term, despite the wars you got us into. But you're just wrong on this. Our wireless networks have fallen behind in the last 3 years and don't match Albania's.
That's astounding. Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me take you back to what you were just saying. We were talking about what can we do to get everybody connected. At the FCC, there's a proposal to use universal service in order to give a minimum connection. Right on, and I'll believe it when it's available. Mm-hmm. AT&T and Verizon are fighting hard. They don't want anybody to get cheap service. That's unfortunate. Something very important is happening in New York that you know about more than I. It is now practical and common to have Wi-Fi for everybody for free. In New York, that was promised by Gail Brewer almost 10 years ago. It now is probably starting to happen.
Yes, it is.
You're going to lose all those payphone booths that most people don't use very often because most of us have cell phones, but not everybody. And they're going to be replaced by a bigger booth that has Wi-Fi, and the city wants to get that out to all neighborhoods. That should happen yesterday. Stu, what happened when you got some Wi-Fi free into Harlem?
Folks embraced it. There's a hunger, there's a thirst out there for free broadband, for free Wi-Fi. You mentioned the $10 a month program that Comcast and others are offering, generally with the stipulation that you must have a child in the household that's on the free lunch program, which is a bit cumbersome for many. But even $10 a month sometimes is a lot for a family that is struggling to pay their bills, to keep food on the table, to clothe their kids, to pay all their other expenses. And if you don't have the experience and the, if you're not in the habit of working with broadband, if you don't know the benefits of broadband, you don't even see why it's necessarily a necessity. So that $10 a month, although it sounds cheap to folks that have a nice job, if you don't, like say 50% of the folks that live in New York City public housing that are unemployed, $10 a month can be a hurdle. It can be an insurmountable hurdle. So free Wi-Fi is something that I think, I'm committed to. My partner, Doug Frazier, and I have been working for a number of years. And Gail Brewer has been a supporter of our efforts to bring Wi-Fi into both the Harlem community and the South Bronx community. We've been working with the college and with Harlem Hospital and with resident association leaders to get it out there, to get it into the communities. The city plan that you mentioned where they're converting the phone booths to Wi-Fi hotspots is great. That's a great first step. But what about internet at home? The phone booth is not right next to where you live, probably. Especially if you're in our poorer communities, you're in a high rise, you're in a housing development with 5, 10 buildings. There's not a phone booth kiosk with this new Wi-Fi right in your vicinity. So what about them? So this is something that we are committed to with our Digital Divide project and Streaming University project, to bring Wi-Fi into those communities all the way into the homes of folks that are in need of this.
It wouldn't be hard to do if our politicians had some courage.
Yeah,
now,
that's a rare commodity among that group.
Well, we all do what we can.
Yeah.
Time Warner Cable is about to be bought by Charter, that's Darth Vader, John Malone, for $78 billion. They have to get approval from New York City and New York State. There is every reason to require that, as part of that deal, they provide free hookups in the housing projects.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've built the network, it doesn't cost very much to add more people on it. We want to add everybody, and we want to find a way. So that should be right there, New York State, Department of, what is it, Public Work? No.
Public Service Commission, Public Service Commission, New York State.
Public Service Commission, should right on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing, Public Service Commission, and even more, the City of New York Franchising Agency, really were negligent, almost criminally negligent. In 2008, Verizon cut a deal in order to get a TV franchise for New York City, that they would bring Fios to every building. A quarter of buildings are not connected yet, and Verizon has no timetable to catch up.
How long ago was that they made that promise, Dave?
2008 or 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of thing the mayor has now started to say, well, maybe we should do something about it and take them to court. No. They should be hit with a fine of 1% of their annual profits. That's about $200 million.
That's a big chunk of change. And what would
they don't listen to anything less?
Mm-hmm. And what would we do with that? That's not just going to sit in the city coffers for them to give out to the cast of usual suspects, is it?
That's not for me to say.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you how you make the networks. I'll tell you what the networks can and should cost and what's possible because they're doing in other places. How to cure the problem with government? Well, I think I'm going to be voting for Larry Lessig.
Okay, well, hold that thought, Dave. We're going to take a little break and be right back with Dave talking about government accountability in telecom.
Ellington, you don't live around here. He moved away one day, so they say, from Harlem. I can hear his echo still.
Come on. Yeah. You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by the jazz man's horn. Oh, I found out on my way through Harlem. Langston Hughes, he don't live round here. He moved away one day from his way here in Harlem. I know that Marvin Gaye used to play right here. Somebody say you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by my daddy's horn. No, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized to the sound of horn.
Okay, we're back. Community and Technology with Stu and Dave. Dave, you're telling us about government accountability and telecom policy, in particular, connecting up the have-nots with broadband. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you were really enthusiastic about these nice words, but I've heard nice words from Washington. Well, I think the first I can remember that was particular on this is a fellow said, I'm going to make sure that there's affordable broadband for all Americans. That was George Bush running for president in 2004.
Really? Did he say that back then, Dave? I missed that.
Yes, he did. And Barack Obama said the same thing in 2008 and 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least since about 2007, the price of broadband in the U.S. has gone up. Right now, it's been going up 3 or 4% a year. You see it on your cable bill constantly going up. And Verizon is the most extreme. They had $15 and $20 service in 2007. As I say, on the FiOS connections, and you're not going to have any choice in some places soon, they don't want to sell you anything that's less than $70. That is not how to bring affordable service to all Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when they put out these nice words and talk about these things we should do in the future and make strong commitments, I want to laugh in their face.
Yeah. You know, I kind of agree with you, Dave. I know when Obama first put out his broadband opportunity, grant opportunity program, 5-6 years ago, we got so excited, A, that the problem had been recognized, and B, that it looked like the government was getting behind funding innovative programs to bring solutions to our communities. Well, that did not happen. The money went to the usual suspects. Folks like DirecTV got $50 million. I mean, it was amazing. If you were already a player, a big player in the market, you got funding. If you were a medium to little guy and looking at alternative solutions to bringing the broadband in, you got no attention. I know for myself, my partner and I, Frazier, we submitted an application, and New York State actually graded and evaluated the applications that went to the feds. We had just recently actually won a grant from New York State to bring broadband into underserved communities in New York City. And they reviewed our proposal to the feds, to the BTOP program, as well as all the other proposals from New York State entities. And we got rated very high, higher than the city of New York's proposal, in fact. Yet when it came time to actually give out the grants, we were on the short end of that stick. So nice words, very disappointing results.
Which is why I have respect for some of the conservative Republicans in D.C. who are saying there's an awful lot of government waste and some programs don't make it.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm looking at the money being given to the big phone companies to connect the rural areas that they haven't connected.
Mm-hmm. That's through the Department of Agriculture.
This is actually the CAF coming out of the FCC.
Okay.
Just got approved about 2 months ago, $12 billion.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's not crazy because it costs a hell of a lot in order to connect somebody who's half a mile from the nearest other home.
Mm-hmm.
$15,000 a mile to put lines up. something like that. So there really are huge costs in the rural areas, which is why they held off on it. However, the amount of subsidy the FCC has approved, and it's hundreds of pages of regulations buried, is about twice as much as it is going to cost the phone companies to actually do the connections.
Are you saying 100% profit? Is that what I hear you saying?
This became clear as they made their financial reports to Wall Street, talking about the improved cash flow they were going to get from the CAF program. Well, in order to wind up with more cash at the end than at the beginning, the CAF program has to give them more cash than everything they're spending on those connections.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We're talking a lot of money there.
And that's taxpayer money, is it not? That's funding these gargantuan profits at these big telecoms. That's our money. That's our you and my. That's
same difference. It doesn't have to come from taxes. It comes from those fees and services.
The universal service funds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just for our listeners out there, the universal service funds. If you look on your traditional phone bill or on your cell phone bill, you'll see all kinds of taxes and fees and extra items that you're charged. A lot of that money goes into what's called the Universal Service Fund, which is administered by the FCC, and it ends up being a huge bucket of money that they then use to subsidize other services. Historically, it's been to subsidize phone service for folks that couldn't afford phone service. And I know going back a few decades, Dave, it really helped bring universal telephone service to this country when that wasn't always the case. And more recently, it's been, I'm not sure exactly where the regulation is, Dave. You can bring our listeners up to speed on that. But they've been talking about reworking that fund so that it could help to subsidize broadband service. And I think that's what, in fact, you're talking about. Is that right?
Yep. Sensible suggestion. You can use Skype on your broadband connection for almost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'm talking to you now via Skype, and it's costing me about $0.015 a minute. Okay? It's a few dollars a month to get plenty of conversation out there.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying, take the money and use it to give everybody broadband. They, in this case, is Minion Clyburn, the head of the FCC, Tom Wheeler, and definitely not the two Republicans there, and definitely not Congress, which is run by the Republicans now.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because why a lot of people are willing to take $10 a month for a mobile phone, and that's what you can get now in universal service. Only a few big companies have the connections to give you broadband on a landline. They're Comcast, Verizon, AT&T.
Wait, you're talking about broadband over a landline telephone line. Is that what you're talking about now, Dave?
It's actually impractical at this point to hook up that many people wirelessly and give them anything decent. That's changing, but it's not there yet. But the same thing applies. AT&T and Verizon, between them, have more than half the wireless lines in the country. In fact, I think it's more like 70 or 80%.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to sell service for $10.
Right.
Even if on a wireless network that's already built out there, you can give that service at a direct cost of $2 or $3. They don't want $10 service out there on broadband or on wireless connections or on wired connections because they want you to buy the more expensive stuff they want to sell.
Wow.
So that's going to be a fight in Washington, and I hope Tom Wheeler finds a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, very hard.
Right. Where do you see broadband pricing going, Dave? You know, with so many services, we're used to the prices getting lower and lower. Remember, you and I have been around long enough to remember long distance telephone service, and that essentially evaporated, and the cost of phone service has been going down, 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 down. Do you see a trend?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Okay. About 8 years ago, that stopped happening.
Is that right?
Yep. If you look at the cheapest phone service you can get from Verizon or at AT&T in California, the rates on that have gone up about 40% in the last 5 years.
Wow. And I'm sure that's not related to their cost basis. That's just what the market will bear.
Well, we all know how cheap phones, the cell phones you buy have gotten, computers have gotten, anything electronic has gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the cost of a phone network, and especially a broadband network, is also electronics. The biggest piece is a router.
Right.
Moore's Law is still working, bringing down those costs 20 to 40% a year. The cost of delivering broadband to a customer has been going down somewhere upwards of 10% a year, or somewhere upwards of 5% a year. You still sometimes have to send somebody out to fix the wires in the field, and people are expensive. We have so little competition that for at least the last 5 years, the price has been going up a few percent every year so that people don't get too angry, with the result that at this point, the United States charges 30 to 80% more than most comparable companies in Europe.
Wow.
Verizon and AT&T are looking for a triple play after they capture introductory orders of $130 to $170. In France Telecom is selling something very similar for $45. That's the best deal around.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go to England and buy it for about $60 or $70. We are the U.S. and Canada are the most expensive countries for broadband of any developed country in the world. Australia may be similar to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is always, we don't have much competition, and the government was unwilling to come in and deal with that problem. A lot of people have say the solution is to have more competition. I don't know if that's practical. So you got to find a solution that works even without that.
So,
much more expensive to have 4 lines to every home than to have 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So either you have to accept it's a monopoly and you have to do something to make sure that people can afford it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you may remember back in, I think, 1996, 97, when they deregulated telecom, there was an effort to make that 1 or 2 lines going into everyone's home accessible to any competitor, to every competitor to use, so they wouldn't have to build that so-called last mile, in much the same way that the long-distance telephone market got opened up, where you didn't have to actually build your into the customer's home. You just had to get the long-distance line, enabled folks like MCI to build a powerhouse company and many others, and Sprint and others to get into the market, where there had been no market. And they talked about that being a way to get broadband competition, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen, did it?
It did so happen.
Okay, tell me about it.
France and England just fine.
Oh, okay.
And that's why France, where there are 4 or 5 competitors, is half the price of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Literally half the price on most things. How much do you pay for a decent wireless connection here? Broadband, phone, SMS in the U.S.
You're talking about telephony or data?
Both. It doesn't make sense to sell them separately anymore.
Yeah, I don't know, $50?
It's just an application. It's just another way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Verizon and AT&T still have most of their customers on $70 to $100.
Wow.
They now, because T-Mobile and Sprint were getting so desperate, they brought the prices down to about $50.
Mm-hmm.
They actually have some offerings they try not to sell you at about 50. In France, you can get unlimited phone calls to France and 25 other countries, unlimited, one of them which is the U.S. You can sit in Paris, pick up your phone, and call Denver, as we did. Unlimited SMS, and it's just gone from 4 gigabytes a month to may even be 60. Price? €20, $24.
Wow, that's astounding.
And it's profitable. That price is coming from an outfit called Iliad Free.
Called what? What's the name again, Dave?
Free as in free beer.
Okay.
and the company is called Iliad.
Uh-huh.
And they make so much money every quarter at those prices that they actually pay a lot of corporate profit tax. And the guy who put that all together, Xavier Niel, is now worth $5 or $6 billion. Okay, so that's what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
We know that's possible because there's nothing in the networks in the U.S. that is significantly different or more expensive than the networks in France.
So what are we talking about? Corporate culture that's different? I mean, why is it just, it sounds like it's just economics that are driving the pricing and the availability or unavailability of service here in this country versus Europe and other parts of the world. Is it corporate culture? How would you, what would you point to as to the why?
I've been watching this stuff since 1999,
Mm-hmm.
and along the way I became convinced that prices are determined more than ever anything else by competition and how much competition you have. The prices in France were essentially set when they had 8 or 10 competitors.
Mm-hmm.
They now are sometimes creeping up. They went from 35 to 38 or something like that in the landline stuff, because at those prices only a few big guys could manage to survive.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing it also creeping up in England, but nothing like it is in the U.S.
Well, now, do you see, Dave, do you see anywhere on the horizon the possibility of a breakup of these monopolies like we had in 1984 with the historic breakup of AT&T by Judge Green? Do you see that anywhere in our lifetime that could happen with the giant telecoms that are now have a stranglehold on customers in this country?
Some people do, and I've been hearing that since 2002 and before.
Mm-hmm.
In the glorious days when we believed competition was going to work, some very smart people, David Eisenberg put it together, Dave Farber signed it, did a petition they called, or I called, the Fast Fail petition, saying, don't protect the big companies, let them fail, we'll be better off in an age of competition. That was 2002. We now have considerably less competition than we had then.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all in favor of solving problems where competition is practical. But we need to have a solution that works where competition is not practical or likely. And I had this conversation with Blair Levin in 2009. Blair was running the U.S. broadband plan. He was an old friend. And I said, when we look at wireless, it looks Verizon and AT&T are running away from the market. It looks like competition is failing. And they were getting a higher market share every quarter. It was remarkable. Mm-hmm. Until about 2 years ago, when T-Mobile finally decided they had to do something to bring prices down. Verizon and AT&T were taking over and raising prices. And so I said to him, what's your plan if we have a system where you only have 2 big companies running it? And he said, I don't know.
Really? No plan, huh?
I don't have any answer for you, Dave. And I heard from the guy who was the chief economist of the FCC at that time, or that year or the next year, that he had the same conversation with the head of the FCC, Julius Janikowski. I was talking about this with him, and he said he heard the same thing from Julius. So, great if you can do things with competition. Reality is often you can't. That's an example where I don't want to scream too much about this because it's remote to most of us. But a lot of people, including Barack Obama, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, and so on, were here in New York for the General Assembly and especially the Sustainable Development thing. Zuckerberg and Bono, the musician, put out a great statement saying, we've got to bring the internet to everybody. But their plans are not succeeding. One of the most extreme problems is in rural areas in poor countries. Rural areas in the U.S. aren't doing so well. 5% of the U.S. still has no connection except for satellite. That's despite the $7 billion that was wasted by that BTOP program. When you go to someplace, and I've been talking to the people, like Nigeria or South Africa or Bolivia, the rural areas are not connected. It's getting better because cell phones are so cheap that they're getting around many, many places.
Yeah, tell us about, expand on that, Dave, because I'm looking at a story that just came out this past week that says there are 4 billion people on the globe that do not have internet. 4.2 billion people, or 57% of the population, that don't have internet and won't have it by the end of this year. I know you have some thoughts on that in terms of how wireless is playing into that.
Yeah, and that number is probably underestimated. The companies like to give big numbers to their investors about how many people they've connected.
So is this problem going to be addressed by wireless in some of these underdeveloped nations?
It is being addressed wonderfully by wireless. There have been 2 years ago, Carlos Slim, the head of Telemex, was in for one of these big UN things. And he said to me that I now can buy smartphones with internet connections for $50. He buys them by the tens of millions, so he gets a very good price. But that's now available to a lot of us. With that, 2 billion more people will be connected. And that's happening.
Wow.
Since then, there's been 1 billion people connected with smartphones. Africa, in the next year or two, will have more people on the internet than the United States. India, the same thing. They both have populations of 1 billion or more. Our population is only 300 million. So if you connect 35% of Africans, that's more than the whole population of the U.S. That's happening. And it's going very nicely in most of the cities. There are a lot of companies in Kenya and Nigeria and India proving that you can give wireless service for $4 and $8 a month and make a profit if you go. And a lot of those companies are going broke because it's really hard to make a profit at that price, but it's not impossible. Okay. It's happening, and competition is working well in a place like Delhi or Nairobi. But what's going to happen in the bush? I hope I can say bush about Africa without being racist. What can happen in the poor rural areas that are?
We understand what bush is. That's that's out in the hinterlands, away from the urban centers.
It's a polite term in Australia. I don't know if it's polite in Africa, and there's every reason to show respect for people by not using impolite terms. So if I misspoke, I apologize. There's a lot of places that aren't being connected, and they will be lucky to get 1 or 2 connections anytime soon. Now, How do you make sure they get a decent internet connection at a decent price? Ask Barack Obama's people. They just made a big thing at the UN saying that the way to bring internet to more people on Earth is to encourage competition. That's working really well.
Yeah, I wish they
In Nairobi.
wish they do that here.
It's not working. We're only going to have one or two.
Right. Duopoly is not competition.
Not usually.
Right.
In particular, Gigi Sohn, counsel to the chairman of the FCC, just made an important speech saying that cities that are not seeing competition in getting decent service should consider building their own municipal broadband. That's working really well in some places, really badly in others, so it's a hard question. It's hard to run the network efficiently. If you don't run it efficiently, the costs go off the wall.
Yeah.
But that's the official policy coming from the FCC right now.
Mm-hmm. Well,
from the U.S. State Department, give this, because I'm just angry about this, and I want to say it. From the U.S. State Department, the big thing we put out for this UN conference said it should be done by private companies, not by government. Fine, some places. Paris, Nairobi. Impossible, many places, especially rural areas where they're lucky to have one or two.
Mm-hmm.
One or two is not effective competition, and the U.S. State Department is following the rules being put to them by AT&T, Verizon, and their friends, who have enormous influence at the U.S. State Department on things like this.
Right.
And it's just stupid.
Yeah.
We've got the FCC saying competition isn't working in a lot of the U.S., and we're going and telling the Africans, well, the way you solve your problems is competition.
Dave, I got to cut you off, Dave. We're not going to solve this in the 30 seconds that we have left on air. This is a fascinating topic. Let's talk about it some more next week on community and technology. Thank you, Dave. You've been a font of information and insight into what's going on telecom in the U.S. and globally. Thank you. And okay, and so long. And we're gonna stay tuned for Brother Bill with news at the top of the hour. At the top of the hour, and stay safe out there. You may have heard there's a hurricane warning afoot, so get your flashlights, get your batteries, get your backup water, and stay tuned to WHCR 90.3 FM for news and information that will keep you safe. WHCR. Okay, Bill, hang on.
Skyline, have you anything?
Brother Bill, top of the hour. News, WHCR FM.
It's 76 degrees in Harlem. This is Bill DeFoss at WHCR 90.3 News. A Bronx newborn didn't live long enough to get a name or a chance. The helpless girl, minutes after drawing her first breath and still alive, was tossed to her death from a 7th-floor Bronx apartment window by her mother. Jennifer Berry, 33, a former child welfare worker, seen possessed Monday as cops led her away from the horrific crime scene in the courtyard of the apartment building on West 183rd Street. Berry was charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter after an autopsy determined the child wasn't alive when she threw it out the window. Now, here's a new twist to this story. The Westchester County District Attorney is re-examining the circumstances of a previous child 7 years ago that died, and Jennifer Berry is the mother. Of course, the number of people sickened by the Bronx by a second outbreak of Legionnaire's disease grew to 10 with one death. The city confirmed the jump in individuals affected with the Legionella bacteria, up from 7 the day before to 13 as of now. City crews descended on Lehman High School Tuesday night, one of the spots that came up positive. Although sickened with the bacteria had underlying health problems, and officials are asking anybody with flu-like symptoms should report to an emergency room immediately. Abbott City and Development Corporation, the sprawling housing and social service arm of Harlem's most influential black church, was cut off from $3.1 million in city contracts 2 weeks ago after it failed to submit 3 years of overdue tax filings and